Angela, I do have a question.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so you have breakout rooms in your session, right?
Right.
Okay, so I'll just test that out once. We had a little bit of an issue in the morning with that, so I'm just gonna test that out once.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
एक BST
We'll wait for a couple of more minutes, Angela, then we begin.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, Angela, let's begin. It's 1:15 and we have about 103 participants. And I'm starting the recording.
Perfect.
Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all the participants. Thank you for joining us today for the session Evolving Your School with 2020 Program Standards and Practices. I'm Madhumanti. I'm the Learning Support and Student Counselor in Eve Academy PYP. We are really honored to have Angela Michael with us today. She is going to be taking us forward with this on this topic. And I would like to let you all know about a little bit about Angela. Angela Michael is an IB World Schools manager based in the Singapore Global Center. She has over 2 decades of experience in education and 15 years working specifically in IB Continuum schools with the Asia Pacific region. Angela is an experienced administrator and most recently was head of elementary at Hanoi International School prior to joining the IB. She has been widely involved with the IB Educator Network for over a decade. Angela has a passion for supporting school innovation and improvement, specifically through a systems thinking approach. We welcome you today, Angela. Before I hand over the floor to Angela, I have some housekeeping rules for us. Today's session will be recorded and we will be able to share a link with you after the event is completed. I would request you to keep yourself on mute for the entire duration of the presentation and be mindful of the background noise. And because we are a large number of people, we will be going ahead with the chat box facility. We welcome your questions. Please put up your questions on the chat box and we will address them at the end of the presentation. I hand over the floor to Angela. It's all yours, Angela. You can take it ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to start with this slide, which is just to say thank you so much to the Neve Academy, to Madhu, who's our moderator today, and really most of all, thank you to the participants who are joining us. I mean, I think time is our most valuable, unrenewable resource, and you are using it on a Saturday afternoon to find out more about the IB standards and practices. So, I mean, really, my hat is off to you, and I just want to say thank you so much. And I'm excited for our session together, and I hope that you walk away feeling not only inspired, but also that you have some great tactical things to be able to go back to your schools and communities with. So a big thank you to you, and also, of course, to SIPSA and to our hosts. Okay, so we're just going to start with sort of having some introductions. If you can put your information so that helps me know who's here, what your role is, what brought you here today, what school you might be representing, or are you an independent consultant and you're just really curious about the PSPs. So add that into the chat because I'll be making sure to look at that throughout this session. So just as we get started, and I'm just going to thank you in advance for your patience. I think sometimes trying to digitally facilitate on Zoom is a little bit like a civilian flying a plane. So I just thank you for your patience if we go backwards and forwards a little bit. As well, I want to know about your sort of interest, what brings you here today. So if you can join me in Mentimeter, either with your phone and scan the QR code, or if you just go to menti.com and enter the code, there's going to be, we're just going to do 2 questions together to find out as a group some information about evaluation. So I'm going to switch over to the Mentimeter poll and stop the share and pull that up so we can see what our results are looking like. Here we go. Okay, it's thinking. So let's see. Let me know, either unmute yourself or let me know in the chat if you're having trouble accessing the poll or if it's my end. And the Mentimeter link. Oh, yay, it's working. This is like magic. This is magic. Okay. So good. Okay, so I'm going to go, here we go. We've got some areas of evaluation you think are the most valuable to your school. So we've got how you learn collaboratively, what recommendations you have that come out, practices of teaching and learning, assessment, formative, celebration, wonderful, collaborative learning. Oh, more collaborative learning, that's coming through as a trend. Learning and teaching practices. More collaboration, oh, involving all of your community. Good, looking at your learning and teaching practices. Great, lots about investigating your teaching. Excellent. Good, curriculum, intercultural understanding, celebration, and ideas about moving forward. Great, collaboration with all stakeholders. Good, looking at the connections and the transdisciplinarity with assessment. All right, collaboration is coming through. I'm going to see if I can just pop back to the last slide here in the Mentimeter poll and go back up here. Okay, and in our word cloud, when we said what comes to your mind when you hear evaluation, what like pops into your head, collaboration was the biggest trend that came out. Documentation, it's a big one. Assessment, reflection, journey is a big theme. Test compliance, that's definitely a stance that sometimes we think about. A diagnostic test, interesting, great. Practices, implementing, wonderful. All right, timely and growth. Good, excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much. That is a fantastic way to get started. And I can see more things coming in. You will have access to the Mentimeter results, and I'll make sure that that goes on another shared resource that we're going to use throughout our session today. Okay, let me jump back over to our presentation. Okay, magic. Here we go. Okay. So we're going to think about the what, the why, and the how. Always good to ground ourselves in what we're doing today, why we're doing it, and then how we're going to do it together. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore the standards and practices and the evaluation process that connects with those standards and practices. Why are we going to look at it? Because our goal is that really this is going to help to strengthen and serve school communities. We want it to be something that can really help to move your school forward as a point of growth. And how we're going to do it is we will use different collaboration protocols, and we want to make sure to be looking at what our understandings are as we go through together. Those are some things we're going to do today. And by the end of our time together, here is our forecast, the aims that we have. And that is to review the framework. What does the new framework look like? Why is it designed the way it is? How is it shifted in its stance to a more of a developmental model? Then how can you use it to really help your program grow and develop? And then what are the key resources that you should know about so that you can take those back to your school and again, make sure to operationalize some things in your school community. Okay. All right, so we're going to use a Padlet today. I've linked some resources on this Padlet for your access, so you'll be able to go back to it, and it has connections to PD resources, as well as some key documentation linked to the standards and practices. So that's there and available for you. And what I'd like you to jump into now and go and visit is what are some things that you already know, either about the new standards and practices or about the evaluation process, and what are some things that you are really curious, what are like your burning questions that you want to find out more about. So there's two columns. You can go just put a few ideas in, and we're going to pause there to give you some time to do that. I'm going to go. Okay, perfect. I see people using it, so I know you can access it. That is brilliant. Perfect. Great. So a few things people think they already know, that it evolves around learning. It's new sets of documentation, the framework. People are curious about how to unpack this in a purposeful way. That's a great wondering and curiosity. Curious about evidence. Good. People already know, or they think they already know, that it's like revamping and really trying to energize the IB programs. It's a learner-centric. Good. Someone put in that it's a parameter. It is sort of like, this is a good way that we help have a defining container of what it means to be an IB school. What are the guiding principles and of course practices that go along with that? Good. Someone knows there's 4 aspects to them and learning is one of them. Yes, we will get to that. Great. Thinking about the impact is on learning. That is a good key takeaway. Good. A good curiosity is, why is there a change? Good. How do you meet these updates? Good. And what are the major changes? Excellent. Okay. I will let people keep adding more detail. We will revisit this Padlet as we go through the presentation. So you'll be able to come back to it and use it as a resource. So either keep it open on your browser but I'll make sure to add the QR code and links in as we continue going. Okay, so we're going to start with the big picture. We're going to really fly up high into the altitude and make sure that you have a big overview of the framework in the new 2020 Program Standards and Practices, or PSP framework. So we are going to start with a short video. And we're going to cross our fingers and see how this works. Here we go.
Schools are central to the IB and its mission to create a better world through education. That's why the IB has developed the Program Standards and Practices. More than a checklist, it's a framework that supports schools as they integrate IB philosophy into their context, helping educators to successfully implement IB programs that live and grow. All schools develop a purpose that reflects their shared commitment to the IB's mission and philosophy. Their environments are designed to support their purpose. That way, educators can create a culture which truly supports the learning that underpins all IB programs. To achieve this balance, Program Standards and Practices has 3 levels. Standards are the ideals which all IB World Schools aim to reach and apply to all 4 IB programs for students from 3 to 19 years old. Practices are the specific ways to meet these standards. Practices encourage schools to grow and develop and are outcomes for the schools to strive toward. Schools must meet and maintain all requirements and specifications in order to demonstrate the practices. Requirements clearly lay out the expectations for all schools and include any specifications that are specific to one of the programs. For an IB program to succeed, practices must work in unison. The Program Standards and Practices enables educators to implement the IB programs successfully. What's more, this framework helps schools unlock the full potential of a program and express how it grows within their community.
Okay. And this video is available in the Nano PD series that I've put the link in the Padlet for you. So you'll be able to go and revisit that or use it with your staff if you are unpacking that and beginning to work with the PSPs with your staff members. So just so you're aware, you will be able to go back to that and find it again. Oh, I don't want to watch it again. There we go. Okay, so thinking about the framework, and this is something that is definitely, if we looked at what is staying the same and what is new, this is a new component because we've shifted away from having, you would be quite familiar with Standard A, Standard B, Standard C. We've shifted, and now you really see that there is this beautifully balanced triangle, and right in the center is learning. And someone identified that already in the what do I think I already know, is that it is very learning focused and everything is connected to learning in this framework. So it's a way of looking and describing the school and thinking about the balance of these 4 pieces. So learning, of course, is at the center because we know from everything we know about schools is that if you don't have learning within your school community, things are going to start to fall apart. So that, of course, is the core. And then connected to learning is the area of purpose. And that would be where you have your school vision and mission. And that, of course, is also surrounded, of course, by the IB philosophy and your own school context, the culture of your school. So how are you implementing these sets of patterns and behaviors? And of course, we know that the school environment is also going to be really critical to how learning is happening. So it's really helping to make sure that we've designed something that's for schools, and it's trying to replicate and demonstrate how schools learn and what we know about how schools learn. So it's a little bit about the framework. Something else that we know from great meta studies, bodies of research, is that schools are organizations who are consistently learning organizations, that schools never stand still. So it's really about thinking, how are you developing, how are you adapting as your school community, and how are you growing? So it's this continual cycle that happens. And of course, the evaluation process is one part of that cycle, but it's a continual cycle of sort of inquiry as a school community, and where do you want to go to next within your context as a learning organization. So it's really thinking about schools being inquirers, own. So something that the video referenced was that the standards, that's the largest piece of the framework, is what all schools will be aspiring to reach towards. Okay, so this is the ideal, the aspiration that we try to reach towards, and it is for all programs that we have. Connected to that are the practices. And within these, so this shows you or demonstrates a specific way that you might connect with that standard, that aspirational standard. And sort of below that is you have requirements, which is something that feedback we receive from schools as an organization is, could you please help to make really clear what are the key requirements? So a theme that came up, I've already seen come up, is about evidence. So what is the evidence that I need to be able to show that meets the requirements? So we've tried to really make very clear what are the requirements for all IB schools. So an example of a requirement might be a policy, like your language policy, and that would be a requirement that you would have. So these are the minimum expectations we want all schools to have for the fidelity of your program. And then finally would be the specifications, and that would be related to a specific program. So a requirement would be for all programs, for example, the language policy, but a program specific requirement might be something that only one program does. So for example, with PYP, it is the only program that has a program of inquiry as how they construct the written curriculum. In MYP and DP, it looks different, and in CP, different again. So that's just a little bit of how these elements are different. However, they are interconnected. This is one more way to see just an example, just to give you a specific example of the structure. So we have the standard, which again, remember that's the biggest or highest level. So one standard as an example would be that learning in IB World schools is based on a coherent curriculum. We want all schools, of course, to have coherent curriculums. The practice underneath that is that teachers are collaborating to design, plan, and deliver the school's program. So the practice again is the same for all programs. And then the requirement would be how the teachers are collaborating. And then you might have a program specific requirement that goes within that. And as well, the developmental paths are how you then evolve your implementation of collaboration. Is it something that happens on an everyday basis? Is it something you have timetabled? Or is it something collaboration isn't easy? It involves humans and it can be messy. So something that you're always maybe working to continue to strive towards excellence towards. So this is one example of how the structure works with the standards and practices. Thinking about the design, how are the standards and practices designed? So we have a policy and design team, and they looked at this model that comes from Peter Senge, and it came out of his book, The Fifth Discipline. So he looked from a systems thinking perspective, and he looked at ways that we can use systemic thinking. So his model showed that sort of if you think about an iceberg, what you see on the top would be the events in a school. It's what's happening in your school community. The events are showing above the surface, but what happens underneath the surface are a great many things that influence the events. So in his iceberg model, he talked about the patterns of human behavior that are going to influence the events. And then the underlying structure, even beneath that, would be different mental models, habits that staff have, as well as other artifacts and the organization and the different infrastructures that are involved. So this model was looked at because of the way of systems thinking and how to support schools. And there are connections to the way that we want to make sure that schools are thinking and reflecting upon how is your infrastructure, how are anything in your underlying structure, how is that connected to the events which might happen on your school campus. So this was something that the learning and teaching, the policy and design team who created this framework, they looked at these models and they were thinking about how to bake in to the standards and practices something that was related to a systems thinking approach for schools. A few other shifts that are happening that we feel are really positive and to the benefit of schools is really shifting away from sort of an idea or connection to evaluation as a method of compliance. That when evaluators come to your schools, they are coming as inspectors. We really want to shift that mindset and have the shift being on the school. It's really about your learning and how you are an evolving system, as opposed to, if you can think back to the 2014 set of standards and practices, which were quite lengthy. They were very discrete. Now we've combined and collapsed many of those, reorganized and made it more succinct set of practices. So it's really about thinking, what do we know about learning? How can we help to drive it to support the school experience? Ooh, here we go. This is where it's, okay. We're gonna see if we can go backwards a little bit. There we go. Okay, so a few other shifts, really thinking about how can we give to schools in the experience of the whole evaluation process and also through your visit, more focused feedback. How can we be listening to schools and asking you questions about what you need through the process and making sure that really there is a positive impact. So it's not about just these details that we need to make sure, but really looking at it holistically so that it positively impacts your experience and your students, and that over time, the self-study will be integrated into the life of the school as opposed to a one-off event that might happen every 5 years. So there are lots of things that are, of course, changing. We hope this is all in a way that you would agree is a positive shift and trend. However, what we know are there's some things that will not change, and that is the programs aren't changing. We still have 4 programs. We still do have expectations and requirements that are a minimum, so we make sure to keep that fidelity to what it means to be an IB school. And we want reflection and growth. That is really your primary driver that's helping to improve the program over time. There's lots of things we want to just acknowledge that are staying the same. We have enough change right now in the world. Make sure to stay with what works. I want to make sure that you do know where you can find the information if you haven't been able to, here we go, source it before. And that is if you go straight onto the public website on IBO.org. If you jump into My IB and the Program Resource Center, in the Program Resource Center, you are able then to find IB Education, that section on IB Education. There's a whole section on PSPs, and then click into any of the rectangles next to the program model, and that will bring you into an interactive space with all of the program standards and practices. So we do get feedback that sometimes navigating the Program Resource Center isn't entirely intuitive, and I appreciate that. I work for the IB and it's not always intuitive for me, so we want to make sure to share exactly where you can find these resources. As well, I think it's important to know that the self-study process has been condensed and it is shorter than the previous experience if you've gone through this for the 2014 process. And We really strongly encourage schools, if you keep your documentation updated in an annual way, for example, with your policies, your PD charts, things like, of course, your POI you would update annually, that when it comes time for evaluation, you are going to be in really good shape. So it's sort of like a health check. If you go for an annual health check and you know that you're in, good positive health, when it comes to the next 5 years, you don't need to have a really comprehensive physical. You can just go in for a minor health check. And that can be something we really want to make sure schools are encouraged to do. The visits will be 2 days. They have been shortened in length. So the visits will be a 2-day visit. If you also have a DP program in your school, you can let them know that all DP schools get a visit as well. And the focus is really on what is your program development, because there will be a look at your documentation before the visit, 4 months prior. And the reports are very much future focused. There will not be recommendations and commendations. They're designed in a completely different format. So there's a new structure to reports, and really looking at giving focused feedback, very bespoke to a school context. So just to wrap up, before you go and get to process a little bit, is that there's lots of things that are going to stay the same. There is still a self-study, there is still a visit, you will still receive a report. There's a lot of content that has been redeveloped, and there is more support that is coming to schools. And so our goal really is that you have a significant improvement. We want to really be talking much more about supporting students and what is the growth and deepening of your program over time. So Madhu and I are going to put you in a breakout room to process a little bit, because you just received a lot of information, and thinking in the terms of what is becoming clear to you, what is now becoming a little bit more clear, and what are some areas that maybe are still cloudy or fuzzy, you want more clarity about. So what is becoming clear and what is still cloudy? And if one person in your breakout room could help to put that on the Padlet, the QR code is there for the Padlet. So Madhu, if I can kindly ask for your assistance to help us with breakout room.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Yes, yes, and simplified too. Yeah, I think we're supposed to leave the breakout room and we can go back to the main room.
All right, as folks are coming back into the room, just looking at things that are becoming more clear is just the consistent growth and focus on learning, that it has been simplified. Yeah, it's systems thinking. Good, the feedback and feed forward is more specific to the school, and things that we still want to try to keep clarifying. If you're going for your second evaluation, what are the expectations? The difference between the 2014 and 20. What are the new expectations? Okay, the next section might help with this. Okay, and requirements. Okay, ooh, we're gonna come into this next section. And the change. Oh, how to look at culture. Great one. Okay, good questions. Thank you. Okay, thanks for jumping into a breakout room and having some time to process. We know that learning is social, and so it's good to be able to process with your colleagues. Wonderful. Okay, so we've taken a look at a big picture of the framework and the pieces that are within that framework. So we have learning, of course, at the center, culture, environment, and purpose. And that is going to be encompassed around the IB philosophy, or the IB philosophy surrounds that all, as well as your school context is so integral to the success of making, of course, the program standards and practices come to life. And I think that's a real consideration, is making sure that we're acknowledging and naming that the context of a school is so critical to the success of the school, and then how you implement and bring to life the standards and practices. So we're going to connect this now with what are the new components, what are the new sections if you are going through evaluation. So I hope this will be able to address some of the questions that have come up, both before in what you wanted to know, and also things that might still be a little bit cloudy. So one new section is what we call the preliminary review. And this is where the school will take the required program documentation, and this will be given and sent to the IB, and that will come not right before your evaluation, but this will come 4 months before your visit. So there'll be a review of what you have submitted, and then what happens is you receive feedback on this documentation by 1 month after your submission. Whether or not things they look really good, are there any questions? Maybe are there some areas that could be further developed? And that's where potentially there could be what we would now call a preliminary matter to be addressed. And a school would have the opportunity to be able to address this right away before the visit happens. So the current practice is that there is a visit, you have your report. If the report contains matters to be addressed, those are addressed after the report is issued. We have flipped that around, and we've said we would like to look at a very large bulk of your evidence 4 months before the visit. We will give you feedback on that. You have an opportunity to go and make any changes, amendments before the visit happens. Again, we want schools to be successful. We want you to have your best, most amazing program, not to get through the evaluation process and then have things as matters to be addressed, which are really compromising the integrity of your program, that you need to deal with afterwards. So we want to give every chance possible before the visit to take a look at those. So then you can revise, you can resubmit documentation, and you can do that as needed. Again, before your visiting team comes to your school. So what is included in the preliminary review? So within the guide to program evaluation, in the section that is called Appendix 1, there's a really clear list. Again, trying to make as transparent and clear for schools. What are the requirements? What is the evidence? The word evidence came up as a trend and as something that came out in the word cloud earlier. So there's a really clear list of what things need to be included. And even further to that, if you look at where the arrows are, it even breaks down in more detail. What is the exact item? Where is it attached or connected to a practice, one of our standards, or perhaps it's connected to one of the rules for IB World Schools, and that's where it would be in an article. If you see, that's what we would say, like rule and then the article. And again, at the other column, which says expectation, that really clearly shows, here's exactly what we're hoping to see in your documentation. Because we do not want schools to feel like they're playing a game of, guess what's in my head? I know the answers and you don't, because that's an unfair thing. We would never do that to students. It would just absolutely be something that we wouldn't want to do for success. And so we want to set schools up to be successful. Here's exactly what we're looking for. Here's where it's connected to a specification or a requirement. Here's what we're looking for in the expectations. So this, so far, for schools that are beginning to use this process, has been very well received. So that's a preliminary review and some of the pieces within it. Okay, another new component. This is the piece I get really excited about because this is called a program development plan. Now, what is program development? This might be something that you are already doing quite often on a regular basis. What we are now including is a framework or a template to make sure that your program development is captured. And that's the intentional and the really focused way that we know your program is deepening. It's ongoing. It's making sure that you're continually crafting, as an evolving system. We know that you're making those refinements and you're strengthening it, again, for the benefit of your student. So it's following really an inquiry cycle. Again, the same way we're using what we know about learning. You would do this with your students. You would go on an inquiry, and now we're taking it to a school level, and you'll do a school inquiry into a specific area for program development. So here are some of the key pieces that I have linked in the Padlet about some FAQs, the guide to program evaluation, and making sure that you have all the resources if you want to go further and dip into those, that you know where to find those on the PRC. So how do you put together a program development plan? This is a question we get a lot because it's new for every school. So if you have this question, don't feel silly because guess what? It's new for everyone. We have a singular goal, and that is that the development plans positively impact kids. That's it. We want to know that your development plan is something that is really coming with an outcome to the benefit of your learners. So there are different sections, and we will take a quick walk through those with, what is your focus? The rationale is, why are you doing it? Why is this important to you and your school? A planning stage, how will you implement it, analyzing your implementation, and then the last stage being the understanding that you've come out with, and then application. So it walks you really I won't say it's simple, but it's very clearly laid out, the different components that you need to follow. So why have we added this? People ask, so hang on, this is new. I used to just collect evidence. I did a self-study and we had a visit. That was it. The program development plan is new. Again, we want to ensure that schools are able to showcase and have a template or a framework that they can show all the efforts, again, we already know schools are doing, that are enhancing and strengthening your programs. So the process would be that you choose an area you want to enhance, develop, one piece. You're going to show how you did that. When you have your evaluation, you will select one program development plan to share with the team. You'll do that before the evaluation happens. That's 6 weeks before the evaluation. You'll send this in with your self-study questionnaire. And then the plan will be discussed really in detail during your evaluation, and there'll be more feedback that comes out inside the evaluation report. So this will be a really key area of the new evaluation process. The template, again, is new. This so preliminary review is Appendix 1. This is Appendix 2 in the Guide to Program Evaluation. So there's a step-by-step way that you can walk through this and all the parts and some guiding questions to be able to help you with this. So that's going to be able to give you some support. A question we get often is, do I have to use the template? You do not have to use the template, but you need to use the different aspects inside of the template. So how we talked about those steps of, starting with a focus, going on to your rationale, those 5 different areas that it will walk you through in the template. You could make it your own, but you have to be able to incorporate those components inside of the school developed template if that's something that you would like to do. There is more guidance that's available in our Nano PDs. And so there are more videos, there are some interactive pieces where it takes the development plan and you can click and it will give you more detail and depth if you're able to go in, and that link is within the Padlet in the resources section for you to be able to access. I'm going to give you a few quick samples. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. So again, you're thinking about the area of focus, the conditions that you want to have in place so that you can put this into action. We would say the agents are who is going to do the work. So if this is going to incorporate a specific department, is it going to be for the whole school? Maybe it's just one grade level team. Maybe it's grade 5 looking at how they want to redesign their exhibition process. And so it would just be for a team. And then how will you achieve the work, and what will you look for your indicators of success? And so that would be your why. And then some activities that you would have, as well as timelines. So the scope of the plan is something to consider. We know that, to be able to make sure it's successful, you want to really think about, okay, how it could be really, really straightforward and simple. Or of course, we know on a continuum, it could also have great complexity. So that's something to really just be pondering over as you're thinking about setting up your plan. How long would you like it to be? Is it a 3-month project or plan? Is it going to go for 12 months? Will it go for longer than that? And also, who is it impacting? Is it impacting a small group of students? Is it something that has a wider audience? Who will the impact be on? How many people are involved? This kind of links up to the complexity piece as well. What will the resources be? Is it something that you might need a budget for, or is it something that you can just be able to pick up and it doesn't have any costs required? And of course, we know that plans might have further or connected work plans that will be related to it. So this would be sort of how you're going to action it as it is operationalized. So as you're pondering what a program development plan is, just put some ideas in the chat. It would be interesting to hear from you. What are some areas you're already percolating or thinking, this could be an area that maybe we could be able to develop a program development plan? Because what I can promise you is that all schools will be developing their own program development plans moving forward towards their upcoming evaluations. And we hope, our goal is that it's not only at the time of evaluation, but it's an ongoing and annual cycle that's taking place for the benefit of schools. And of course, our goal is to impact students. So I'm just going to give you a few other ideas of some plans that people have constructed, or that people, schools and teams have constructed. One was around learner agency. So in these quadrants, we're looking at what are the conditions, who's going to be involved, how will they do it, and why will they do it. Something that is unique to the plan is that you will connect the practices from the program standards and practices with your plan. That is going to really set it apart from just maybe another type of action plan that you would be doing. So the conditions would be what you pull out of the practices. So you can see here that this school chose to pull these two practices about their assessment policy for creating a culture of continuous learning and growth, how teachers are using inquiry, action, and reflection to develop natural curiosity. Who is doing it is this is really looking at, they have selected this school's pedagogical leadership team, embracing educational approaches, and that students and teachers use feedback to improve learning, teaching, and assessment. Something as well that was baked into the design of these standards and practices is in every sentence, in every single statement, it will show you who. It will always have sort of an actor, like whether it's teachers, students, pedagogical leadership team, it will always tell you who, and it will always tell you the action or what they would like you to do, whether it's implement, embrace, reflect. I can see some of these examples here. So that was something that was intentionally designed and created with these practices. How will they do it? They will participate in appropriate and timely PD. They will try to remove barriers, teachers remove barriers, pursue, achieve challenging personal learning goals, and then why, students taking ownership of their learning and setting challenging goals and pursuing personal inquiries, and here using their ATL skills. So that's just one example of a development plan and how they've taken the practices to link to this school wanted to really look at learner agency. So that's one idea of a development plan. Another one, I'm going to scoot through because I'm aware that I want to leave time for questions and answers, is how to use the library. Again, here's the four main areas that you will need in your plan. This is a key practice about coming out of environment. So the different colors of the practices come from the different sections. Who's doing it? The teachers, making sure to have a relevance with the curriculum. The school building relationships with the wider community to strengthen the implementation of the program. How they will do it, looking at their academic integrity policy, that's something that they wanted to connect to this. And again, teachers using inquiry, action, and reflection to develop curiosity in students. And why? This linked back to the similar one about students using their ATL skills and students pursuing opportunities to explore and develop their personal and cultural identities and making sure that that connects with the resources in the library. So that is just another example. And then you would, of course, construct and create your own. Where can you find all this information? On the PRC, when you go in, click on the section specifically for implementation. And then the free Nano PD is on our public website on the IBO.org website in the PD section. Just quickly, just to let people know that the visits are going to be, again, 2 days, and the focus of the visit really is on the school's ongoing development. And so that will make sure that, again, prior to the visit with all the preliminary review work, the bulk of the evidence will have been uploaded. So by the time the visit happens, really the conversations are happening around learning and the growth and evolution of your program. The IBEN roles related to visits are changing. So previously would have had a team member and a team leader. Now these have been significantly updated to match the new process. So now we have what's called evaluation leaders. They will lead and they will make sure to have experience with change management, and typically be heads of schools. And there will also be program leaders who will come in with that program specific deep knowledge to be able to support the evaluation leaders. And this training has just begun and is just in time training because we have our first visits happening in October and November. So really, the main takeaway is when you are an IB World School, we know you are a living entity and you are constantly growing and evolving and adapting. And so through the process of not only evaluation, but also using the new 2020 standards and practices, we hope that it'll be an opportunity that you can self-assess and reflect and also continue to develop and grow. And then that's something that every school is on their journey. The word journey came out in our word cloud, and I would absolutely agree. I think every school is always on a continual journey. And we hope that these are a fresh set of tools to be able to let you reflect and then further develop and grow your program. I'm mindful that we are just running like a little bit. How are we doing on time, Madhu?
We ended 3:20, so you might want to keep some time if people have questions to ask.
Okay.
Do we want to go into a breakout room for 5 minutes?
Could we do a 5-minute breakout room?
Yeah, I think we should be okay.
Okay, so a 5-minute breakout room, and just process with the folks that join your breakout room, sort of what was something that maybe, what did you used to think? And then is there anything differently that your thinking has shifted, or now you know something that might be new? And you can add this onto the Padlet and also just make sure to, yeah, hopefully there's things that have shifted in our time together. Okay, thanks Madhu for helping to send us into some rooms. Okay, we're back. Madhu.
Yes.
I did it. It's like a time hop. Okay, now Madhu, you mentioned that you have been helping to monitor the chat and any questions that came up.
We have still not got any questions from the chat, but I would request everybody, if you want to share questions, the room is open for it and we do have time to discuss the questions. So please, if you have questions, then please share it on the chat box.
Okay. While you are adding questions to the chat, a really good question came up in my breakout room, which is, will we still have an action plan? So we were talking about the program development plan. And so the question was, what happens to the action plan? So the answer is yes, you still continue to keep an action plan. It's just now it will be structured under purpose, learning, culture, environment. That action plan will look over a longer time horizon of up to 5 years. And then for the program development plan, so hang on, let me go back to the action plan. The action plan could have, it's sort of like your kitchen sink. You could put as many standards and practices in it as you want. There's no limit to that. But on the program development plan, it is one specific area, and then there's no more than 8 practices that you connect. If we looked at that example of the library, then you would have just no more than 8 or less. I think the minimum is 4 that you would be able to do, because that's for the different conditions, you know, the who, what, when, and why. So those 4 different areas, you want at least 1 practice in each of those areas. Okay, I'm going to pull up the chat and see. Madhu, you want to help with these? Which questions are?
Yeah, we do have a question from Sakina. What's the duration of the program development plan?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So this is really is going to be impacted by the context of the plan and the scope of the plan. So if, as an example, if this is something, you know, your school had to move online for virtual learning, maybe the scope of the plan was, we just wanted this plan for 2 months because we really had to focus on what does it mean to shift from an in-person learning environment to a virtual learning environment. And we want this plan just to be a 2-month kind of sprint, so that we make sure that we're staying true to our IB principles and practices, but we're doing it now in an online setting for 2 months. That's our key focus. Again, it could be like exhibition. You have a shorter time frame because this is, you know, coming up to exhibition, and then that program development plan is going to have a shorter duration. Or maybe you have a focus like inclusion, and then it's going to be a year-long program development plan. And that program development plan goes for a whole year. It involves all staff, and it maybe could be something that maybe even is extended depending on sort of how things go at the end of the year and what your reflection is. So the answer really is that the school determines the length of the plan, but typically about 6 months to a year is a common timeline for program development plans.
All right, we have another question from Gemily. Is there a consideration of the local context that the school is set in?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I think, you know, looking at the framework with the, you know, triangle in the middle and the circles around being the IB philosophy, and then connecting to the context of the school, that is something actually we want schools to be quite, I'm not sure vocal is the right word, but we want you to articulate really clearly how your school context influences the way that maybe you're able to implement the program. Of course, connecting to what you know about making sure to have the fidelity of the program. So we have schools in over 150 different countries, and they all implement the program in a really unique way. But one of the sort of beauties of it is that it is a framework, especially for PYP and MYP, and then you put in your specific context and then have it come to life. And so I think trying to articulate and make that really clear for the visitors and also just through your self-study, what is unique about your school is something that we encourage.
Okay. Next question is from Gautami. IB portal still has 2014 SMP. Should the schools update the same?
So so we are in a time of transition, not only globally, but also within the IB, transitioning from the old to the new. There are many schools right now who are still have their evaluation date that is using the 2014 practices. And so until the end of 2021, there's quite a few schools that are continuing to use the 2014 practices until the end of this year. And our goal is that by 2022, all schools in their evaluation will then be using the 2020 program standards and practices. So that's part of the reason why both are still available on the PRC. Does make it a little bit confusing. You have to be really clear about what version your school is using. So unless you have an evaluation visit coming quite soon, you probably would know if your visit is coming by the end of this year, then we would encourage you to start shifting over now to being able to use the 2020 standards and practices.
Okay. Another question. I would like to gain more clarity about leadership for 4.2 and 4.3, if this is the right platform to ask this question. Okay. This is from Millicent. Please forgive me if I've pronounced the name wrong.
Yeah. Millicent, I have my email at the end of the slideshow, and if you could email me, we can go into more detail about the distinction between those specific practices, if that's okay.
Okay, we have a question from Ida. Is the IB team expecting the development plan specific goal to be achieved by the eval visit or post the visit?
So the goal would be that the program development plan that you would have been able to complete the cycle of the program development plan. We understand that perhaps maybe the topic that you chose, the content, let's say it was on learner agency, that is something that might be ongoing for many years with schools to deepen your understanding of learner agency. But the goal would be that you're able to submit a completed program development plan, even if that still is an area of focus for your school that's ongoing. The development plan would have all the stages filled out, because then you would speak further about it at the time of the visit. So you want all the stages filled out.
We have a question from Kanchan. Will there be any document to guide us specifically on evaluation process and shifts?
Yeah, so I would encourage you to look at the guide to program evaluation that talks quite, we built it to be talking in a really clear way about the process for a visit. It talks about what happens before the visit, during the visit, after the visit. So that document in particular would be something that I would point you to. And the second, processes and shifts. Yes, and also the FAQ document, I would also make sure to access. That has lots of frequently asked questions that we've received so far.
Okay, we have a question from Anjali. What elements should be considered for designing the school descriptors?
Can I clarify with Anjali, the school descriptors are for the self-study for the rating, is that correct?
Anjali, may I please request you to unmute yourself and share your understanding?
Yes, yes, I'm looking for an understanding about the achievement descriptors regarding the grading, how we put them under the developing, developed and highly developed. So for creating those school descriptors, what should be considered or what factors should we consider for that?
Okay. In the guide to program development, there is a description of the different areas that you can rate yourself in. There is a description that it shows, and then the school would, much of the evidence you would need for any of those practices would also be connected to the requirements in the preliminary review. So you have the preliminary review to use as a bank of evidence, as well as your program development plan. So I would say go back to the descriptors in the guide to program evaluation. And then if you want to add further detail for your school context, then that's something that schools are welcome to do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Angela.
We have a question from Ms. Rachel. So if evaluation is in 2023, it's best to introduce teachers to the latest standards and practices now?
Yes, absolutely. I would start working with them now and just introducing the language, the framework, how there have been some shifts. And yeah, use the resources in the Nano PD section of the free learning with the videos and interactive pieces for the school to be able to engage with in some collaborative meetings. That would be a great way to do it.
We have another question from Sakina. Would also like to know if the IB has any expectations to how many program development plans does a school need to work on, or would that be at school's discretion?
So if we think about what is the minimum requirement, it is that there is one submitted before the evaluation along with your self-study. Now, our hope is that a school would construct as many program development plans as is useful to the benefit of the school. So if you have, again, a specific department that wants to have a development plan, and maybe that's something that a small group is working on, your leadership team has helped to make one that's really impacting maybe all teachers in the community. You can have as many as you would like, but when it does come time to evaluation, you will just choose one and that will be shared with the team. So we don't have a maximum. We hope that schools will use it as a way to help to reflect and plan and of course impact students in a positive way, but the minimum would be that there's one by evaluation.
Okay, we have another question from Ms. PP. I understand that program development plan is one aspect of the change that the school is mapping as per the new PSP.
Yeah, so the program development plan will be something that, of course, is an inquiry that the school takes. And one of the key features is that you are connecting it to the program standards and practices, or the practices in particular. So we really want schools to be, on an annual or regular basis, engaging with the development plan.
We have a question from Rati. Need clarity about practice 3.5 evaluates and reasonable. Does it include what we have in our assessments?
I'll be honest, I don't have the practices in front of me. So I would have to look at it like specifically to be able to answer accurately. And I don't have them in front of me at the moment. So
we have another question from Thanga Lakshmi. If the school gets into the practice of making program development plans every year, can this be used during the evaluation year?
Yeah, so if you made a plan every year, first of all, that would be fantastic, because that would be a way that you're reflecting, taking further action, deepening your program. And then when it comes to your evaluation year, you would have a bank to choose from, which is really powerful, because you could look at all the different development plans that you created over time and say, okay, which would we like to show to the visiting team? Right now, I have a lot of empathy for schools that are preparing for an upcoming visit, maybe in October, and they're making a program development plan, but they, they might make one or two, but they won't have a really large bank to draw from. Whereas schools that might have their visit in 2023 or 2024, you could start now and begin engaging in this cycle and this work. And then when it comes time for your visit, you have a lot to be able to look at and select from. So I would encourage schools to start now.
I just have a query, if I can just kind of interrupt in between and ask. When you're talking about the development plan, suppose it was one of the MTBs that was provided in your evaluation report, and you take that as one of the development plans that you want to work on. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, Angela, we have covered all the questions which came in on the chat box.
Oh, I see one more, and that is the document ready for the new PSPs? And the answer is yes, definitely it is. It is published. It is available in many languages, and on the Program Resource Center is where you can find it. Okay.
I'm just relieved that you don't remember all the standards and practices. So much pressure. I honestly, when I see people rattle off, and I was like, okay, she's just like us. It's not necessary to kind of know everything by heart. Thank you so much for that reassurance, because I met so many PYPCs who just kind of rattle it off, and I was like, I'm really petrified of them. So I'm thankful. Thank you.
Oh, goodness gracious. No, I don't have them memorized yet, and I'm not sure. Well, it will take me some time to do so, but I think the more important piece is the conversations that you have related to them, and that you engage with the documentation and have good dialogue, really with a focus of how does it help students. Well, I just can't say thank you enough to this group. It's been such a pleasure. And, I think on behalf of the IB, we are really, really enthusiastic about how this can support schools. Again, sort of with the design and the intent, it was very much to benefit schools and try to make the process more clear and more transparent. So we appreciate your feedback. Keep in touch. And I will make sure right now to put my email in the chat. If you do have any questions, you're always welcome, to stay in touch. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Angela, for this enlightening session. I'm sure we have so much to take back, and it was really insightful with your expertise on the topic. Thank you so much. And I thank everybody for being a part of this presentation. Goodbye, and have a restful day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it. Enjoy your Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.